let's start with just kind of broader industry news. I'm curious if there's anything that's kind of caught your attention over the past, couple weeks. I know on May 28th, House Democrat Jerry Nadler introduced the MORE Act, right? The Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, which would eliminate criminal penalties, clear criminal records, and create programs focused on repairing communities, right, while also federally legalizing marijuana. Do you have, is anything sticking out to you here? If you have thoughts on the MORE Act and what's moving ahead or might not move ahead in Congress?
Yeah, I think the big thing to watch here is, well, first of all, Olivia, anytime we're talking about the United States Congress, there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, and I think, a lot of investors are probably deservedly more optimistic these days about the potential for major cannabis reform than they've been in the past. And I think that optimism is somewhat warranted because the odds are better than they've been in the past. But anything can still happen, and there's just no guarantee that this MORE Act or any other major cannabis reform legislation is going to actually get passed. The issue, of course, it's easy to get through the House, relatively easy. In fact, we've seen that already happen, that some major cannabis legislation has passed in the House. It's the Senate where it gets rocky, because the Senate is still 50-50. It's split right down the middle between Democrats and Republicans. And so the tiebreaker vote goes to Vice President Harris. And so the Democrats have a very slim control. Democrats are typically more favorably disposed towards cannabis reform. So the real question is going to be what happens if any of these bills make it to the Senate. There's always a possibility that Republicans could filibuster and keep anything from even coming up for a vote. That's a real possibility. Now, I think there's at least a chance that the GOP won't try to filibuster cannabis reform. And the reason why I say that is, if you look, a majority of U.S. states now have legalized cannabis in some form, and those senators represent those states. And so, I think there's at least an outside chance that we won't see a filibuster. And if any legislation gets to the Senate floor that's reasonable, and I think the MORE Act is reasonable, I think the votes could be there for it to pass. We'll see.
I think that's a great way to look at it. I think this is something you just have to wait, and you can't predict anything that's going to happen, right? And with this act in particular, I think it made it to the Senate last year, right? Failed there. A companion bill died there. But a second bill is expected to come later this year that's already been backed by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Cory Booker, like names that lots of people know. And they might not think that this MORE Act now is doing enough, right? So you've even got other Democrats saying, is it doing enough? And then you've got Republicans asking, is it doing too much? But yeah, you're totally right. There are lots of red states, might call them red states out there, with representatives now who think that they could benefit too from something like the MORE Act.
Right. And especially medical cannabis is actually quite popular with the American people, even more so than recreational marijuana.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that you're going to see enough opposition mount, even with GOP senators, to something that isn't too controversial. And I don't think some of the cannabis reform efforts that are making their way through the House is too controversial. So we'll see. I think there's reason to be guardedly, cautiously optimistic, but don't necessarily count on anything happening this year.
Totally. All right. Noted. Yeah, it's pretty cool when you see Alabama just legalized medical marijuana, I think this week, right?
That's right.
And it's looking pretty good in North Carolina as well. There's some rumblings, at least, from what I can tell. But
yeah, Olivia, I've always compared what's happening in the cannabis market to what happened over the last several decades with state lotteries. It started off with just a state or two having a state lottery. And then some of the states realized, oh, our neighboring state is making some money here. And so they started thinking, well, maybe we could do it. And so another state or two did it. And then it just kind of like dominoes falling. More and more states did it. And I think we're seeing the exact same thing, especially with medical cannabis, with so many states legalizing medical cannabis, but also
Totally.
with recreational.
Totally. I'm in Pennsylvania currently, where we're sandwiched between, right, in a way, New York and New Jersey, both of
Right.
whom are rolling out recreational cannabis now, and losing out on the tax income from cannabis is maybe a top, if not the number one consideration, especially post coronavirus pandemic, in terms of whether it's a good choice to legalize or not at the
Yeah,
recreational level.
if there's anything that states really are after, it's more money.
Yep. 100%. Love
Yep.
that. All right. Those are
Follow
your
the
industry
money.
takeaways. Follow the money. That's your industry takeaway for the
Yeah.
day. Bold.